Hey everyone. So, as many of you may know, I'm away from home for the next 3 months, so I don't have my nice garage studio space to record in. So, anyway, I am up in Washington State for 3 months, and I wanted to share a video from day 50 of my North American road trip, which is the overland train, this very early ancestor to Tesla, or they say early Prius, which was regenerative braking back in the 50's, a diesel electric hybrid with regenerative braking, and had 54 motors, one for each wheel. This thing was huge, very long, had 54 wheels on it, and that's why it's called land train, because it was like a big long train that went across the tundra to supply the distant early warning line, which was when they're spying on Russia. So it's like all top secret spy stuff. Anyway, so here we go. We got this video. Hope you enjoy it. This thing you see here, this massive piece of machinery, look at it compared to the Tesla. See,
well, you got that for scale.
Yeah.
You got me for scale. I'm quite tall too.
What is this that we're looking at?
Well, this is LCC-1, Logistical Cargo Carrier number 1. It's a Laterno land train. It was meant to supply the stations along the DEW line, the distant early warning line, during the Cold War. This is a Cold War vehicle. Along the North Coast was a series of these distant early warning stations. The North Coast, like way
Lake Inuvik, Prudhoe Bay, that region.
Yeah, there were stations all along there. Well, looking over towards Russia, watching out for those guys.
Right.
So this was meant to supply those.
Right.
So it's meant to run not on roads, just across the tundra.
Okay.
These giant tires are meant to kind of bounce along over everything. One of the issues with trains that don't run on tracks is you got to know where you're going, because it's pretty hard to back that thing up. But as it relates to the Tesla, which I think is interesting, is diesel electric. So this is to some extent diesel electric and with regenerative braking. This technology was first used on trains, like diesel locomotives, and they would have regenerative braking. Laterno, who created this, took the way the power was created with diesel locomotives, and he separated them. So each of these tires are electrically driven.
So it's like one of the first hybrids.
It is exactly one of the first hybrids. So it had regenerative braking, and it would create enough power that it would store in a battery in this front section, which would power its ignition to start it up.
Wow.
So I don't think it would run with that stored power, but it would use it for its ignition. So it's a very early Prius.
What? In what year?
This is early 1950s.
1950s, they had that technology.
I have a letter which is from some high up U.S. military about how they were going to put a reactor in here, because that was also a really reasonable form of electricity generation in the 50s, right? Vehicles driven by nuclear
power?
Yeah.
Wow.
So they were going to put a reactor in there. There were smaller cars during the 50s that were running on that, not in the Yukon. I think they were called like the Fusion, and it was those kind of names.
Wow.
That's when they were doing that electron gardening. It's like weird.
I didn't know that.
There's all kinds of weird Cold War nuclear. People got all excited about it.
There's a lot of history.
Because it was the cleanest, best kind of energy until it has its problems.
Right.
Yeah. These tires might look familiar. If anybody knows, I think it was in 80s and 90s that kind of mud bog, whatever, big wheeled truck called the Bigfoot. It used tires from one of these guys. Bigfoot.
Yes, Bigfoot. It was in a movie, I think. An old 80s movie?
Yeah.
There is a lot of history in transportation that most of us don't know.
Well, do you know what the coolest thing about transportation is? Is it really tells us a lot about ourselves. It tells us how we connect to each other. I mean, why the heck are people transporting stuff around? Generally, it's for reasons of love, right? Or things like greed, or things like necessity, or
Right.
it's all those very human emotions, and it comes to play, like the stories come out in transportation. Well, it
Right.
comes out in anything.
So
Get into any
basically,
kind of history and you fall down the rabbit hole, and it's awesome.
it boils down to the amygdala, the part of the brain which is for love, food, uh, like greed, all that stuff, the emotions.
Yeah.
The way I remembered it is one professor said, just remember the 4 F's: food, fight, flight, and sex.
Yeah, that's right. That's transportation for
that's
you.
the
All
amygdala.
summed up.
And so that's, transportation. I never thought about that,
Yeah.
but
And it comes out in all
to
kinds
transport
of forms.
food, and
Yeah.
I didn't think about the romantic things, romantic getaways, or going to see your love from a distance.
Yeah.
You have to drive there or take a horse there, whatever the transportation was at that time.
Yeah.
They had to figure out a way to get there.
Well, if you think, like, transportation is moving people, their things, and their ideas
Right.
across the landscape, so that includes things like mail. Or
Right.
like texting,
Right, exactly.
or whatever kind of.
Yeah.
And why? And yeah, that big answer. Why do people do that?
Transportation was the main source of communication
Yeah.
before phones, before anything else.
Yeah.
They had to get there in person somehow, either with a product, a letter, or in person.
Yeah.
Interesting.
First, you had to walk your voice somewhere.